So, Patrick, I assume that you recorded violin on the most recent album, is that correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And so can you speak to how Jose directs you on what he expects of you during those recordings?
So the most recent album was my first full-length album with the group, but I had a couple of other recording experiences with him when I first joined the group. We had done something for the Latin Grammys in 2022. 2 tracks, one of them was called, it was for Marilyn Odessa, who is like Jose's niece. She's also an artist. We did a Christmas track for her. And then we did a Christmas track that was just released as a single called La Noche Buena. So I had had a couple of experiences recording with him. So I wasn't completely caught off guard, and I had heard a couple of stories before. I grew up in the Rio Grande Valley of South Texas. I wasn't a part of the program, but Mariachi, that is a part of the University of Texas, Rio Grande Valley. One of their albums was produced by Jose, and he had done some of the arrangements on that album. And so hearing from people there from the community of what their experience was like recording with them, I had kind of a general idea of what it was going to be like. But it was very nerve-wracking for me still. I recorded first violin, which is one of the harder violin parts to record. I play first violin in the group, but now having that responsibility of this is forever going to be the lead melody that you hear on these violin tracks, and it being like this more romantic style album, the string lines are extremely beautiful, and so if they're not well played, then it's going to be heard, and they're more exposed as opposed to probably some other albums, some other styles of songs that the group has recorded in the past. And so Jose is really good at describing to you what it is that he wants and how to get it. A lot of people will tell you that there's an issue and then just kind of expect you to fix it without necessarily giving you the tools on how to do it, and that's what separates a good director from a great director. So having him there in the studio telling us what to do, and then also being surrounded by other musicians that at this point have now not only worked with him but recorded for him for a number of years, made things a lot easier as far as just do your job, follow and do your job.
When you're recording, do you go through the whole piece, or do you record like certain phrases separately? So you go start, stop, one phrase, start, stop, another?
We start, stop, and go through each of the different phrases. There is probably a beauty in being able to just go in and record everything through one take, but in order to play some of these parts that are rather intricate, that take a certain level of sincerity and detail to them, it's hard to just get that through immediately in one take. Also, when you're in the room with 6, 7 other violinists, or even though that might have been your own personal great take, it's about ensemble work. And so if it was great for you, but it was terrible for 3 other people, then that's where the issue is. So it's about doing things piece by piece until we're able to get things as close to perfect as we can.
How important is it for you to have an understanding of what the other violins are doing relative to what you're playing when you're in the studio?
It is extremely important. And I think that's one benefit that this group has, is how often we play with each other. So Sol de Mexico is consistently busy with concerts, with gigs. We have the restaurant. We have the benefit of being able to grow to have some kind of group chemistry and knowing the tendencies of each other and getting to know, okay, this is how the people next to me tend to do things. And while there were a couple of other invitees into the recording session, the vast majority were the 6 violins that you're going to go and see on stage when you're going to watch Sol de Mexico. And so having that awareness and that familiarity with everybody makes things so much easier.
And are those 6 violins present when you're recording your parts, or is it just you and Jose? What does that look like?
No, we do it as a section. So we do it with everybody, unless you're recording some kind of solo violin track, which I didn't record any of the solos on this past album. That was our lead violinist, Adrián Grijalva. And so in the case of for him, for example, right, when he's recording those solo violin parts, and then in that case it is just him and Jose working on those. We could be in the room, I guess, if we wanted to be, but when this past recording session we were at I think it was called the Pale Moon Ranch, which is the studio owned by one of Jose's kids, by his son Alex Estrada. And so it was like out in the desert, and it was a super long day. We've been recording like for 8 or 9 hours. We all needed like a mental break, and it's like, okay, we're done with the tracks, now to do the solo violin parts.
Is there a difference between the way that you play when you're playing a song that is meant to be happier versus meant to be sad? Are there variations in your interpretation, even in the studio recordings?
Absolutely. So, funny enough, everything that I've recorded with the group since being in has been of either like a sadder feel or a more romantic feel. So I haven't had the opportunity yet to record something that's a little bit more lively, a little bit more of a happier sounding. But knowing what we do whenever we're playing here on stage, like within the group or with here at the restaurant, and knowing what are the stylistic differences or the technical differences that we're doing within those songs, I'm assuming that that process would be pretty similar to each other. It's just understanding what your role is depending on the song that you're doing. Everything changes. I think a lot of like mindsets and experiences. So whether I'm playing violin or I'm singing something, before the song starts, I'm already kind of thinking of the words, what the song is trying to say, and try to put myself in experiences that are similar to those, and try to have that come through either in the way that I'm playing or if I'm singing something. A phrase that's thrown around a lot within this group is we play the way that we sing. And so if you're going out there and you're emoting and you're pouring your heart out as you're singing this song, but then you pick up your instrument and you're extremely stiff with it and none of that same emotion is coming out, which I'm definitely guilty of having done that before. I went to school in Texas where I minored in classical violin, and so I'm like I have this tendency of getting stuck in my head and thinking about, oh, what's going on with my left hand, what's going on with my bow hold, what's going on with this and that. And I'll lose the reality that I just need to be able to give myself up to the song. And having that reminder of being able to, that's ultimately what we need to do. Playing in tune, playing on time, all of those things are nice, but if you don't have anything to say with what you're playing or with what you're singing, then the audience is going to be able to tell.
And how do you ensure, in your words, that you have something to say when you're playing?
I think it comes down to authenticity. It's coming down to being real with yourself. And so that's why, even if it's really difficult or it's really uncomfortable, you have to put yourself in some of these positions of some of these songs. Looking at probably the track that's become the most famous off of this most recent album, Mi Último Fracaso, the words to that song are about a lost love because of your mistakes, because of how you treated this person in the relationship and everything falling apart. It's your fault. And I'm 26 now, I'm recently married, and so I've had a couple of experiences in which I can relate to that, where it was due to my actions as to why things didn't go the way that they should have. And so by being real with myself and connecting to the song in that way, that allows me to bring a more authentic representation. And I think the audience isn't dumb. They can tell when you're faking it. They can tell when it's an act, and they can tell when it's not.
So when you're playing that song live, are you playing those, you might call them negative images in your head while you're playing in order to get yourself in that mode? Like, this is a sad song. I might be happy because I had a wonderful day, but I need to get in that mode, as it were.
Yeah, I do. I do that. When I'm singing or when I'm playing, I do. So for that one, I absolutely do. Yesterday at the restaurant, too. There's probably other people in the group that are a little bit easier at being able to get there without having to do like that kind of method acting thing of having to put yourself in that, but I'm not that kind of musician. I have to put myself through that and almost kind of relive those things in order to give the most authentic interpretation that I can.
Is it the same thing while you're singing?
Yeah, it's probably even harder when I'm singing, because the violin, at least you're somewhat detached from the instrument. With your voice, it's the instrument you're stuck with.
And so how do you make sure to once again hit those notes, emotional notes this time, when you're singing?
For me, when I say it's harder, I mean that it's harder as in like, it's really easy then for yourself. It's like you're balancing a thin line of, if you veer off too much into those negative emotions, those experiences that you're pulling from in order to give the most authentic interpretation, if you lean too much into it, then that's when you have situations of like musicians not being able to finish the song. Or just getting overtly emotional to the point where it's now hurting you technically. Now you no longer can sing the high note that comes in at the end of the song, or now you can't, the big jump in the intervals that's happening, it's what's getting in the way of that is you reminiscing a little too hard on the tough experience that allows you to connect to the story that the song is telling.
How do you know when what you're doing on stage is resonating with the audience? Are you ever paying attention, or are you like in your head as it pertains to what you're playing and what you're singing?
So I should be a lot better about thinking about the audience, but for the longest time for me, I viewed music pretty selfishly. I viewed music as like, this is for me. This is my outlet. This is my emotional outlet. This is my way of getting my feelings across to people, and however they decide to take it, that's how they're going to take it. That's how I always viewed it for the longest time prior to joining this group. And joining this ensemble, while there's still a little bit of, I'm doing this for me, there's the reality of now I'm on stage going on these tours across the country, sometimes internationally. I can't just be thinking about myself. I'm not going to lose myself and not think about how this performance or how these songs are affecting me. But I also have to think about, well, maybe a certain hand gesture, making myself look a little bigger on stage, or maybe walking from side to side, or maybe even if it's tough, putting on a bigger smile and moving a little bit more when I'm playing. Maybe those performative aspects are going to help draw in the audience a lot more, even if it's a little unnatural for me.
You'll have a lot of opportunities to practice that on the Christmas tour. You have 24 dates,
yeah,
if I'm not mistaken. So what do you make of the scale of this?
The scale of the tour every year, it seems like it's growing larger and larger, and so it's incredible to me. It's incredible the how massive this tour is consistently becoming. And I remember prior to joining the group, always looking forward to Sol de Mexico coming to Austin, Texas for the Texas leg of the tour. I went to UT Austin. I graduated with a degree in biology, a minor in violin performance. And that was always something that I looked forward to because it was in December, right around the time after finals, after the semester. And so I always looked forward, like, oh, okay, well, even though Austin's not exactly a mariachi hotbed, it's not San Antonio or South Texas, but the fact that Sol de Mexico, one of the best groups in the world, was still consistently coming, it gave me something else to look forward to. Like, okay, I get to finish all of what I have to do right now with school, and then I can see Sol de Mexico like a week later. And so now for me, seeing that it's expanded from, because before I think it was just El Paso, Austin, and Roma, Texas. I think those were the only, now we have like 8 shows in Texas or something.
Corpus Christi,
like,
Houston.
Yeah, Corpus Christi,
others.
Houston, San Antonio, all of these other places. And San Antonio is an interesting one because while San Antonio is historically probably the most well-known mariachi city in the state of Texas, it was very much so just a Mariachi Vargas city. So Vargas was there every year since the 80s, all the way up until maybe 2 or 3 years ago. And you have this massive mariachi craze that happened in the city, but it only kind of stuck with one group in one area, and that was it. So now that San Antonio has become more welcome towards a different group with a different style, with a different way of interpreting things, for me as somebody who grew up around that area, it's really heartwarming because I'm able to come back to a city that's going to become like an adopted home for me and see there being so many people looking forward not just to seeing me because they know me, but to see Sol de Mexico and to be able to see what it is that we help provide for an audience and what's different with what we do.
Final question. ¿Qué esperas transmitirle a la audiencia con esta gira navideña?
Para mí lo más importante, cada concierto, pero especialmente sí con los conciertos en la gira navideña, es la alegría que es parte de celebrar Navidad con su familia, con sus amigos, con su esposa nueva. Entonces para mí es muy importante que la gente que es parte de esta celebración con nosotros, que ellos tienen el mismo sentimiento de alegría, de celebrar, que ya después de todo el año, de todo el estrés, que estamos juntos y estamos celebrar, que es el tiempo más bonito del año, cada año.